Please divorce me for the sake of your life." It was 20 years ago that my ex-wife said that to me. We met at a small town factory. Back then, I was a fresh graduate from a technical high school and a new employee, while my ex-wife, Emily, was the daughter of the president. She was attending college and would often help out at the factory. We were both in our late teens and got along well due to our close age. It's amazing, you can operate such complex machines so easily. Well, I did get a bit of practice in the tech program at school, so I've got the hang of it. I always make defective products according to my dad, so he says I'm not cut out for machine work. I guess I just don't have the talent. She looked somewhat downcast as she said this, which I found quite adorable. After that, whenever Emily visited the factory, we would have lunch together, talk about machinery, and spend time together. She was a cheerful girl, always smiling, and seeing her smile made me want to keep talking to her forever. Time flew by, and I turned 25. I was well regarded at work and steadily climbing the ranks. After graduating, she got a job at a different company and stopped visiting the factory. But I couldn't forget about her. Then, one day, something happened. As I returned from work, I saw an unfamiliar woman standing in front of my apartment. Is that her? She looked so different, I barely recognized her, but it was indeed Emily. It's been a while, but what brings you here? Sorry, I just found myself here before I knew it. I was living in a company dorm, and her house was just beyond that. I remembered we often used to walk home together. Is something wrong? Let's not stand here, let's go to the cafe across the street. Okay. We sat down and ordered 2 coffees. Her hands were red from the cold as she warmed them on the cup, then took a sip of coffee before slowly starting to talk. My parents suddenly suggested a matchmaking. I said I didn't want to get married yet, that I wanted to work, but my dad just yelled at me. He said I should marry soon and start a family, that it gets harder as you get older, and he wouldn't listen. Why did you come to me? I thought, you might be able to do something. It was a crazy story. Not to toot my own horn, but I think I'm a trusted employee, even by the president. But when it comes to fixing family squabbles, I'm at a loss for ideas. How about just getting together with me? I said it as a joke. She blinked and then said, "That sounds good." Her smile was carefree. "That's right, I'll become your wife." That was just a joke. I'm not joking. Her cheeks puffed up adorably. She seemed more mature over the years, but inside, she hadn't changed at all. Thinking this, I smiled at her. "What's so funny?" "Nothing. I just thought you'd become more beautiful, but you're still you." "What does that mean?" She looked somewhat shy, which I found quite cute. Meeting her again after so long, I was sure she was the one for me. We moved quickly after that. She sorted out her belongings from the apartment she rented, and I looked for a house for us to live in. Then I informed President Carter about it. It was like an official announcement of our relationship. For me, it was also like a confession with my future life at stake. I'd like to date your daughter with marriage in mind. I want to live together with her. President Carter was surprised, but his wife, who handled the accounting at the factory, said, "You're serious and trustworthy. I feel safe entrusting our precious daughter to you. We always see how hard you work." She gave her full approval of our relationship. Even though it was a small factory, she was the president's daughter. It took courage and determination to express my desire to date her with the intention of marriage. After hearing the President Carter's wife's words, I was deeply relieved after several sleepless nights of anxiety. Following that conversation, I worked even harder. I wanted to live up to the trust her parents had shown in me by working even more energetically than before. I revised the factory operations and successfully increased production efficiency. Sales increased day by day, and the company's performance visibly improved. Eventually, we got married and officially became husband and wife. A year later, We had a daughter, and our family grew. Later, I was recognized for my performance and became the factory manager. The company grew larger, thanks in part to the booming economy. I thought this happiness would last forever. But life doesn't always go as planned. One day, my wife collapsed and was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was uterine cancer. She had to be hospitalized and underwent surgery. That was the start of a chain of misfortunes. Affected by the bankruptcy of a major overseas company, the economy started to falter. At the factory, where we had been working overtime every day, we suddenly had nothing to produce, and there were days when we couldn't even get paid. We're done for. I'm sorry, but I think we need to close down the company. No way. President Carter, you're kidding, right? I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do with my own power. We couldn't fight the tide of the world. But at a time like this, I thought we should support each other as a family. That's when, out of the blue, my wife said to me, "Please, let's get a divorce. I want you to start a new life." "What are you talking about all of a sudden? I can't just leave you and our daughter, especially now. We should be uniting as a family to get through these tough times." She shook her head. "I actually had someone I loved, but I couldn't marry him, so I chose you. I haven't forgotten about him even now." "What are you saying?" Her words left me stunned. And then she continued, "After breaking up with him and starting to date you, I soon realized I was pregnant. That child might not be yours." Back then, DNA testing wasn't common. There was no way to know whose child it was. I looked at our daughter. She was reading a picture book while hugging a stuffed animal, overflowing with cuteness. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm sorry. Silly daddy." She called me daddy and laughed. Even as I felt guilty for harboring doubts about her, the question in my mind wouldn't stop. Is this child really mine? Or is she, as my wife said, the child of the man she loved? Can I continue to love this child as I do now? And to think, my wife had someone else she loved. Can you give me some time to think? My mind was in complete chaos. I left home for a while and moved into a business hotel to think things over alone. After a few days of contemplation, I went back home and told my wife, "I'm sorry, let's get a divorce. I'm sorry." My wife gave a weak smile, and I couldn't bear to look at her directly. And so, we got divorced. Her parents took in her and our daughter, promising to stay with them until she recovered. I left the factory I had worked at for years and moved to a distant rural town. I started a life alone. Before I knew it, 20 years had passed since I divorced my wife. Not a day went by without me thinking about my wife and daughter. But I thought I had no right to know how they were doing now. Then, one day, something happened. I received a phone call. "Hello, is this Dad?" I was startled by the voice. It sounded just like my wife when she was young. "Is that you, Hope?" "Yes, it's me." "I'm surprised. What's up all of a sudden?" "I had a detective agency find your contact." There was a tense air in our first conversation in a long time. "I see. I know everything. Mom told me, so I have something I need to tell you." "Something you need to tell me?" "I took a DNA test. I am definitely your daughter." I was speechless at Hope's words. "So, I have a request. Will you meet Mom?" "How is Mom doing?" "She's fine." "That's good." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "So, will you meet her?" "Yes, I'll go see your mom." I said it hesitantly. That day, from morning, I was filled with tension and anxiety. The small factory my ex-wife's family owned was still active, albeit on a smaller scale. My grown-up daughter stood in front of the familiar factory. "Dad," Hope waved her hand. Next to her, a young man who seemed to be an employee shouted from the factory window, "President Carter, there's a call from AB Trading for you." President Carter. No way, you've become the president. I'm the one who revived this factory. Hope seemed to have relaxed as we were talking, the tension in her tone gone. It almost closed down, but Grandma and Grandpa kept it going somehow, and I took over after graduating from school. That's amazing. Walking through the factory nostalgically with my daughter, Hope proudly shared. Then she told me about what happened for the past 20 years. Mom's illness, she's completely better now. She swims at the sports center every morning before work. She's very healthy. Then about how she went to the same technical high school as me and studied business administration in college. How she clashed with her grandfather, the former president, while developing new products and expanding customer base. And then I learned she hadn't remarried. Mom has been looking at your picture and crying all this time. That's why I took the initiative to get a DNA test, to prove to her that I'm your daughter. When I did, she cried all night. She was happy to find out you're my child, I asked tentatively. But she was sorry for making me do such a thing. She lied about having someone else she loved and cried. What, really? My head spun in panic. Mom confessed that she said those things because the factory was in trouble. Her health was bad, and she didn't know what would happen in the future. She didn't want to tie you down and has regretted it ever since, crying as she told me. Hearing the truth from Hope, I was speechless. And I painfully understood my wife's feelings, because I felt the same. Dad, how's your health? How do you know about that? I found out when I asked the detective agency to look for your contact. 20 years ago, you were diagnosed with liver cancer and given a terminal prognosis. After my wife brought up divorce, I fell and went to the hospital, where it was discovered my liver cancer had progressed. She figured you thought it was best to leave me with Mom's parents since you were sick. Mom wasn't well, and I was little. She was right. Indeed, when I heard from Emily about the possibility of the child not being mine, I was shocked. But, more than that, my illness had been discovered, and in the midst of my wife's poor health and the family business struggling, I thought my presence would be a burden, a hindrance. That's why I suggested the separation. I've been in and out of the hospital quite a bit since then, but miraculously, I've recovered, I said with a wry smile. That's good, Hope said, relieved. You know, both Mom and Dad, you say it's for the other person, but it's like fighting a one-sided battle. It ends up affecting the child, you know. Hope puffed her cheeks. She looked just like Emily when she was young. But you know, I understand that it's all because of love. Both of you suffered a lot. Hey, Dad, there's no more reason for us to live apart. I think we can be together. Hope concluded the conversation. When had my daughter grown up so much? Tears spilled from my eyes, unstoppable. Darling, as I left the factory, there stood Emily in front of me. She had aged but was still as adorable as ever, unchanged from those times. I'm sorry. That's my line. At my words, my wife looked a bit surprised. Welcome back, Dad. My daughter smiled at me. After 20 years, I was finally able to return to my family. I will never be apart from them again. The three of us embraced each other. It seems we're not a good match. You don't need to come in from tomorrow. I had reached my limit too. I couldn't keep up with a boss like her. I responded right then and there. Understood. I'll resign today. Thank you for everything, even though it was a short time. With that, I decided to leave the job I loved so much. As I was going for my busy days, a new secretary came to tell me I had a visitor. Wondering who it was, I headed to the reception room and saw Mrs. Johnson, the president, there. John, as you can see, would you come back to our company? As soon as she saw me, Mrs. Johnson said hi politely. The once high-handed Mrs. Johnson was nowhere to be seen. My name is John. I've been working at a clothing store for traditional clothes in a small town in Nebraska for 20 years. Recently, there are fewer customers for traditional clothes, so we also deal with suits, shirts, and even take orders for school uniforms to keep going. I have no complaints about this company. In fact, I'm fond of how it's rooted in and values the local community. Dark clouds loomed over the company when the former president, who had been running the company, fell. He had started the store when he was young, but his health had been declining recently, and he eventually couldn't even make it to the store. Then, his granddaughter, with no experience in this line of work, Mrs. Johnson Emily, took over as president. Although she was briefed on the takeover, her way of dealing with people was just awful. I was particularly targeted by Mrs. Johnson. "John, how's sales going recently? I'd like you to close some new deals soon." Mrs. Johnson asked me in a displeased tone. "Yes, I've been making new rounds, but there are hardly any individual customers willing to order traditional clothes." It may sound like an excuse, but the declining interest in traditional clothes year by year is a fact. The diminishing prospects of our traditional clothing store were also a reality. However, Mrs. Johnson relentlessly blamed me. "I don't want to hear such excuses. It's not that we can't get contracts. We just haven't tried enough. You need to do more than just visit our regular customers. You need to cultivate new ones." With that, Mrs. Johnson let out an exaggerated sigh. "Don't think you can stay here forever. Increase your time outside. Don't come back until you get a contract." Mrs. Johnson stood up, grabbing her designer bag. A fancy bag and a well-tailored suit. Mrs. Johnson, being the face of the company, her going to spas and saunas during work hours was losing her the employees' trust. Taking a break, "I have a meeting this afternoon about the uniforms we supply, so I need you to be back by 3. Before I could finish, Mrs. Johnson slammed her bag on the desk with a loud noise. A break? Listen here. A president doesn't have breaks. I don't want to be lumped together with irregular employees. You never know where a good opportunity might come up, and I think it's important to show face actively. I wish you'd think a bit before you speak." Mrs. Johnson, in a flurry of words, turned and walked briskly to the exit. The large diamond shining at her neck seemed especially dazzling. As soon as lunch break started, I gobbled down my meal. Ever since the previous president fell, we stopped having leisurely meals. When Mrs. Johnson took over, she became overly focused on performance and sales numbers, adopting a policy of not tolerating maintenance or regression. There were even days she said, "If you have time for a lunch break, go make sales." We used to order takeout and chat about trivial things, but not anymore. Those were precious moments for employee communication, and I feel a deep sense of loss thinking those days are gone. But there's no time for sentimentality. Today, I need to visit our loyal customers and also secure new contracts. If I skip the greetings to our regular clients and businesses with confirmed orders, I could probably do more sales visits. However, having been in this business for many years, I believe personal relationships are paramount. It's enjoyable to work with trusted tailors, selecting and crafting quality traditional clothes together, and our customers feel a sense of security with our established relationships. That's why they buy luxurious clothes from us and choose us for once-in-a-lifetime events like weddings. Though I can't take too much time, I make sure to greet our clients and vendors carefully. At one elderly customer's home, I asked how their grandchild's wedding went. This grandmother had previously chosen and bought her granddaughter's wedding dress with me. She expressed great satisfaction with the dress and the wedding, which was wonderful to hear. When she said she'd like to do the same for another granddaughter's wedding, I was genuinely happy. Because of these visits, I hardly get to do new sales rounds, and of course, haven't secured any new contracts. The clock had already struck 2. I had to head back soon or I'd miss the meeting, so I started back to the office with heavy steps. "Welcome back. How did it go? You didn't slack off, so you must have snagged at least one contract, right?" Mrs. Johnson said, making me fumble for words. It's rare for her to return early, but her presence is almost suffocating. Seemingly displeased with my reaction, she kicked her desk and raised her voice. Did you achieve nothing at all? You're really a burden to the company. Maybe you should start job hunting. Though, a man in his 40s with no skills isn't in much demand. Angered by Mrs. Johnson's words, I reported my modest success. Well, a customer who previously bought a wedding dress was pleased and said they'd come back to us for another one. Mrs. Johnson snorted in response to my story. And when will they buy? How many dresses? What's the price range? There's ongoing business potential, right? She continued to interrogate and berate me with a cold voice. Listen, you seem to think chit-chat is sales. Sales isn't over until the product is delivered and the invoice is sent. Otherwise, it's not profitable. I don't need your bragging about empty pleasantries. Though I wanted to retort, it was true I haven't secured any new contracts. Determined to land a contract tomorrow and prove her wrong, I started preparing for the upcoming meeting. But as I was stapling the documents, Mrs. Johnson suddenly said something unexpected. Right, I have to leave for an appointment, so let's do the meeting report tomorrow. I couldn't help but ask about the situation as she began getting ready. Wait a minute, I told you that we had a meeting scheduled today. It's urgent to finalize and proceed with orders, so we need you there. Is your appointment that important? Mrs. Johnson made an obviously annoyed face at my question. It's an important dinner. I don't have time to waste on you, so I'm leaving. With that, she swiftly headed towards their exit. Before leaving, Mrs. Johnson turned to me. Don't think your work is done after the meeting. Once you finish ordering, get back out and secure at least one contract. And remember, no overtime pay. Good luck. She left with a loud laugh and light steps. The person came to the meeting, thinking the president would be attending, looked puzzled but eventually understood. In a small-scale company like ours, trust is everything. The previous president always emphasized this to employees and led by example. He was always present at sales and meetings and provided detailed follow-ups after delivery. This had earned us the community's trust over the years, but recently I've felt that trust in our company declining. We managed to secure the usual orders through sincere service. After sending off the business partner, I got ready for more sales visits. I'll be stepping out for a bit. Everyone can leave when it's a good time. Thanks for today. It was already dark, and working hours had long ended. I greeted a few employees and set out for sales calls. The next day, I arrived at work more spirited than ever. Yesterday, during cold calls, I happened to talk with someone interested in renewing their company's uniforms. It wasn't a large company, but the conversation went smoothly, and we figured out that updating their wardrobe within their budget was possible, so I managed to seal the deal right then and there. For now, it's just summer clothes and winter sweaters, and since we're not dealing with a large corporation, the profit won't be substantial. However, if they like our service, there might be opportunities for updating their winter clothes and referrals to other companies. I'm well aware that such connections can lead to new opportunities. Feeling optimistic about reporting this to Mrs. Johnson, I felt light in both mind and body. However, my optimism was quickly shattered. Mrs. Johnson, who arrived a bit late, immediately summoned me. John, don't we have a report from yesterday's meeting? I want to hear about that and what happened afterwards. Yes, I'll report now. I walked briskly towards Mrs. Johnson, who seemed tired, holding her forehead. Are you all right? Do you feel unwell? She just said to hurry up. There was a smell of alcohol. Apparently, she had been drinking until the early morning and wasn't feeling well. I wondered about her professionalism, showing up to work in such a state. Despite my dismay, I briefly reported about yesterday. We'll proceed with the orders as usual. There were some negotiations on price, but they understood it will remain unchanged. Also, hold on, did they ask for a discount? You did push back, saying we want to increase the price, right? Mrs. Johnson glared at me with bloodshot eyes. No, of course, with the rising costs, we'd like to increase prices, but that's difficult since we're offering the same products as other companies. They wouldn't agree, considering their profit margins. My explanation infuriated Mrs. Johnson. That's why we're taken advantage of. If you don't show a firm stance, how will we get ahead? Think about our profits first, not the clients. Even as a president, I couldn't agree with Mrs. Johnson's approach. Sure, sometimes tough negotiations are necessary. But business cannot last if it's only about one party's gain. Especially in company-to-company dealings. Arguing would only add fuel to the fire. I continued with my report. We'll review the pricing. Also, I secured a new contract. Mrs. Johnson's eyes lit up slightly. Well done. How much profit will it bring? We received an order for summer clothes and winter sweaters for a company of a few dozen employees. It's not a huge deal, but it's a start. But Mrs. Johnson's expression turned to one of disappointment. That's it. And it's not even traditional clothes. You're really useless. I had run around tirelessly, even beyond working hours, only to be met with this response. I reached my limit. Excuse me, but you don't understand anything about work. It's these connections that bring us business. Your focus on immediate profit is wrong. For the first time, I stood up to my superior. Mrs. Johnson seemed taken aback at first but quickly reverted to her usual arrogant demeanor. Fine. It seems we're not a good match. You don't need to come in from tomorrow. I had reached my limit too. I couldn't deal with such a president anymore. I responded right then and there. Understood. I'll resign today. Thank you for everything, even though it was a short time. At that moment, I decided to leave the job I loved so much. I wonder what will happen next. Alone in an empty room, I found myself worrying about my future. I had left my job impulsively, but now I had no place to work. Although I enjoyed my job, my salary was never high, so my savings were slim. Even if I cut down my expenses to the bare minimum, my funds would quickly deplete. Then one day, a familiar name appeared on my cell phone. Mike. Mike was a college friend. We kept in touch and went out for drinks for the first few years after graduation, but in recent years we only exchanged Christmas cards. The unexpected call from my old friend filled me with excitement. It's been a while. How have you been? Really long time. I'm good. You sound upbeat, John. I was excited, but my mood soon changed with what Mike said. How's work going? Knowing you, I bet you're managing a big team, right? Well, it's hard to say, but I'm currently unemployed. Mike, always upbeat, seemed at a loss for words. Must have been tough. Let's not talk over the phone. How about we catch up over drinks? It's a short notice, but are you free today? I quickly agreed to Mike's invitation. I was happy to see Mike and also felt the need to talk to someone. We decided on a place and time, meeting up at a bar we used to frequent often. I'm surprised, you clashing with your boss and leaving the company. You always hated conflicts and apologized even if you weren't wrong. Yeah, it was surprising for me too, but the new boss and I just didn't see eye to eye. She didn't understand a field, nor did she care about our clients or partners. Mike just listened to my venting, nodding along. Despite the years apart, I was grateful for a friend I could talk to openly. Were you primarily in sales at your company? I mainly handled sales, but I also worked on the company's website and new products. It was enjoyable, but due to budget constraints, many ideas didn't come to fruition. As I explained, I showed Mike the website I had created on my cell phone. He was impressed. Did you make this? I thought it was professionally done. It looks as good as outsourced work. The former boss wanted a website that would attract the younger crowd, so I learned everything I could. Traditional clothes are great, but the industry is in decline. We had to shift our perspective, but there were limits given our company's size. Mike leaned in as I talked. What were your ideas? Tell me everything. Feeling overwhelmed by his interest, I shared my thoughts and unimplemented plans. Regular use of traditional clothes is declining, but there's a rise in special occasions and moments for social media. Plus, considering inbound tourism, focusing on special days rather than everyday use is the way forward. I spoke passionately. Also, I wanted to create more than just clothes, like delivering high-quality leather goods at a slightly lower price than luxury brands. It would make quality products more accessible and profitable. Mike listened, pondering deeply. Did you hold back because of the initial investment or lack of funds? That, and the current boss shot down my ideas. She said a traditional clothing store doesn't need to venture into new areas. I could see Mrs. Johnson's point. I too wanted to preserve the traditional aspects of the store as the former boss cherished. But it's tough against the industry's declining trend. I wanted to bring new life to the company, but it wasn't accepted. Mike drained his beer and then made an offer. John, how about working at my company? I'll pay you a fixed salary equivalent to what you were earning, plus commission on sales. Not a bad deal, right? His eyes were earnest. I knew Mike had started his own brand and business, but I didn't think he was in a position to hire someone like me. When I inquired, Mike laughed. You underestimate me. My business is mainly online, and I don't have a physical store, but that's enough these days. It's getting to the point where I can manage with just outsourcing. Then, ensuring no one else could hear, Mike whispered his store's revenue and his personal income to me. I was stunned. He was making in a month what I earned in a year. Well then, I'm looking forward to it. Let's start from next week. Having decided to work at Mike's company, we agreed to formalize the contract later. I immediately made an impact at Mike's company. I revamped their cumbersome website, making it easier to search for products, which led to a tenfold increase in page views. Moreover, I introduced suits and leather accessories to Mike's company, which had primarily focused on selling t-shirts. The convenience and quality of these new additions were well received, and word-of-mouth referrals began to eclipse t-shirt sales. Hey, the orders won't stop, and we can keep up with production. Can you do something about it? Offering good products at affordable prices, plus the brand trust Mike has built up over the years, it's great. I'm really happy to finally do what I couldn't before due to budget constraints. While we were having this conversation, purchase notifications kept popping up on the tablet. Production was almost at its limit, but Mike was scratching the back of his head with a pleased look. Your previous company really let go of a great talent. It was just a matter of good timing and environment. Anyone could have done what I did. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. Looking at the display, I saw Mrs. Johnson's name. Wondering what she wanted, I anxiously answered the call. Hello, John. It's a disaster. Can you come back? Can you come back right now? You can, right? Mrs. Johnson sounded more panicked than ever, so I decided to listen to her. What's the matter? Ever since you left, our regular customers say they'll go elsewhere. Our other partners want someone they can communicate with, like you. We can't update the website, and there are constant problems. Can you come back and sort things out? Though I was no longer an employee of her company, I still responded politely. I see. I don't think it's appropriate for me to directly deal with clients, so I'll decline that. But as for the website and system, I'll fix them on my next day off. I didn't hand those over properly, so that's on me. I thought I was compromising, but Mrs. Johnson seemed unsatisfied. What are you talking about? Come back right now. You owe the company after all the help you received. What have you been doing all this time? Are you saying you want to rehire me? I could hear her clicking her tongue on the other end of the line. Don't act all high and mighty. You must be struggling to make ends meet. I can pay you the same salary as before, so don't worry about that. Mike overheard Mrs. Johnson's words and burst out laughing. He gestured for me to say something. Do you know my current salary? I probably earned in a month what you make in a year. My salary at Mike's company would likely exceed my former company's annual revenue in just a few months. Although I had fond memories of my old job, I am enjoying my current work and didn't want to return to work under such a boss. I politely said goodbye to Mrs. Johnson and hung up. Mike's company was so busy with my arrival that we had to partner with external companies and recruit new staff, quickly expanding our operations. Seeing the products I developed being appreciated and shared on social media, I knew joining this company was the right decision. While I was caught up in these busy days, a new secretary informed me of a visitor. Curious, I headed to the reception room, where I found Mrs. Johnson. "John, please come back to our company." As soon as she saw me, Mrs. Johnson said hi politely. The once high-handed Mrs. Johnson was nowhere to be seen. What happened? Let's hear it first. I managed to get Mrs. Johnson to sit on the sofa. She looked exhausted, a far cry from her once lively self. "Since you left, our customer base keeps shrinking. It's not just individual clients, but our corporate relations are dwindling too. I can't even pay my employees anymore. If things continue like this, I'll have to close the shop. I need your help." I felt sorry for Mrs. Johnson, but it was the result of the seeds she had sown. She neglected communication with people and only pursued the company's profits. Losing their goodwill was inevitable. I'd like to help, but I'm fully committed to my current company. I'm sorry I can't assist you. Mrs. Johnson begged me desperately, as if clutching at straws. "Mrs. Johnson, please be strong. Have you done all you can? This is the time to use your feet. Regain trust by meeting people face to face, understanding their needs, and addressing the issues you've neglected. Start with that, and things will surely change. Let's talk after that." Mrs. Johnson wiped her tears and nodded firmly. I was wrong. I'll try to make changes starting now. She stood up, having perhaps realized something important about running a business. However, turning a company around is not an easy task. Despite what I said, I knew it was almost impossible for her to recover at this point. I remembered the face of the previous owner, who had treated me well. I wanted to do something to prevent the company I loved from going bankrupt. But I was fully occupied with my current projects and couldn't think of a way to help. I bit my lip, feeling helpless. Years have passed since I joined Mike's company. As the company grew, we formed relationships with more businesses. "John, what do you think about this? I'm sure it would be perfect for an important dinner date." I was impressed by Mrs. Johnson's suggestion. "Yes, it's exactly as I envisioned. The fabric is wonderful. The response on social media was good too, so let's place an order with Mrs. Johnson for $500,000. "Thank you very much." Since then, Mike's company's performance skyrocketed, leading to the creation of new departments and an increase in employees. I had a hand in producing several hit products, particularly in the suits department. We developed suits incorporating elements of traditional clothing designs and fabrics, which not only appealed to American customers, but also to overseas customers, significantly expanding our market. The challenge was to consistently obtain high-quality fabrics and connect with companies strong in traditional clothing, so I contacted Mrs. Johnson. She not only helped with fabric procurement but also provided user-centric suggestions, resulting in an even better product than initially planned. "I really appreciate your help, Mrs. Johnson. You were a lifesaver." As I thanked her, Mrs. Johnson blushed modestly. "You taught me something important, John. I was such a pathetic person, trying to maintain dignity in an industry I barely understood. It was a terrible mistake." Now, I hear she has built good relationships with her employees and partners and has regained trust in her community. I am confident Mrs. Johnson's company will continue to thrive. Mike, who used to be all about work, also found an important partner. Today is his wedding. I was as happy for Mike's marriage as if it were my own. "Congratulations, you look the best you ever have." "Well, It's all thanks to the design. I just hope I'm not outdone by the suit." Laughing about it, we shared a moment of joy. Clothes have the power to enhance everyday life and make a single, special day even more memorable. There's a certain magic in clothing. I am happy to work in a job that handles such a powerful tool. I want to continue working in a role that adds a touch of beauty to someone's everyday life. You, in this meeting, just a high school grad and a former janitor, right? It's unbelievable that someone with such low education and bottom-tier background was headhunted by this company, and now you think you have a seat in this meeting. Plus, there's one seat short. Your attendance must be a mistake. Haha. At my new job, I attended a meeting. There, an elite manager named Jack, who was already present, scoffed at me with a snort. "I never said I was your subordinate, and the reason one seat is missing is because you weren't invited to the meeting." It seemed he didn't know why I was there. I am Mike. I'm a 34-year-old who works at a local cleaning company. This job may not have a great reputation in the general public, but it's actually full of discoveries and very fulfilling. How can I clean more efficiently, and how can I make it cleaner? While thinking about it, I'm constantly experimenting and trying new things. In doing so, I've even modified cleaning tools and recently started DIY projects. I often find myself thinking, it would be nice if the detergent itself was like this, or if only there was an ingredient that could remove this kind of stain. However, the idea of actually experimenting is daunting, and I can't take responsibility for that, so I just jot down my ideas in a notebook. My cleaning service is well received by clients, and I often get specific requests for assignments. Being naturally neat and a bit of a storage fanatic, I enjoy my work, which has led me to work for various clients. I've been called to clean offices so pristine I wonder what's left to clean, into rooms that could almost be called hoarders' dens. I went wherever I'm called. In this way, I've handled many requests, eventually even earning a qualification as a professional organizer. Lately, my work has expanded beyond my regular clients to various companies, keeping me thankfully busy. Recently, I've received many requests from a manufacturing company called Anderson Industries, and the president of the company has been particularly supportive. Initially, it was business as usual, but after the president struck up a conversation with me one day, we've become familiar enough to chat whenever we meet. I usually visit Anderson Industries once a week, but there was a time I couldn't do so due to a prior commitment, and another employee went instead. Of course, the person who came in today worked really hard, and it's not that they did anything wrong, but I still prefer having you, Mike. I was told that after returning to the office, I felt bad for the employee who covered for me, so I decided to make it a rule to go there every Wednesday. Though I don't know what Mr. Anderson sees in me, he trusts me immensely, even having me clean his home every Saturday. I couldn't think of why he favored me so much, but I was happy just to be appreciated for my work. Then one day, the president of the cleaning company I currently work for suddenly passed away. While all of us employees were grieving, the president's son took over. However, this new president was a big spender, leading to misuse of funds, unnecessary expenses, and even problems with clients, endangering the company's very survival. At this rate, it's heading for bankruptcy. Rumors of bankruptcy started circulating, and many employees left. As employees increasingly left, we had to turn down works that we used to take on because we couldn't handle the orders anymore, and some clients drifted away as a result. I, too, had to consider my options. Still, I went to clean Mr. Anderson's house as usual. "What's wrong? You seem troubled." It seems Mr. Anderson heard my sigh, and he approached me to talk. "Oh, no, I'm sorry for being distracted during work. I'll finish up soon." "No, it's okay. I've always been grateful for your work, Mike. If you have a problem, feel free to talk about it. Maybe I can help." Mr. Anderson forcibly took my cleaning tools and made me sit in a chair in his office. Mr. Anderson himself prepared some coffee for me, and I took a sip. "So, it's unlike you to sigh like that. What's going on?" "Well, actually," prompted by him, I opened up about the current situation at my company and my concerns about the future. I thought Mr. Anderson would be troubled by such a consultation. Yet, once I started talking, I couldn't stop, and before I knew it, I kept talking and spilled out everything. However, Mr. Anderson just listened, nodding. "So, that's how it is. Thank you for continuing to come to my house despite such difficulties." He said this with a smile after I finished telling everything. "No, I'm grateful to you, Mr. Anderson, for always requesting me. I'll come no matter how busy I am." "That's good to hear. I've never seen anyone do cleaning work as happily as you, Mike, but at this rate, you might not be able to come to my house anymore." "You're right. If things continue this way, the company might indeed be in trouble. I guess I really need to consider switching to another cleaning company." As I was thinking this, Mr. Anderson suddenly made a proposal. "If it's okay with you, Mike." "Yes. How about working for us?" That was my first experience of being headhunted. "I beg your pardon. Honestly, there's nothing I can do about your current company, but I'd hate to lose you." "Oh, if you switched to another company, it's not guaranteed you'd still come to us." "That's true. So, it seems faster to hire you directly." Mr. Anderson smiled warmly. I blinked several times, unable to believe what I was hearing. Headhunting a cleaner? I've never heard of such a thing. But looking into Mr. Anderson's eyes, I could tell he wasn't lying. Besides, he's not the kind of person to tell such lies. "How about starting as soon as tomorrow?" Mr. Anderson immediately called his secretary and announced that he was hiring me. The secretary glanced at me and agreed. It seemed that he was serious. Starting tomorrow is a bit sudden. I have other client requests to fulfill." "Haha, I guess I was too hasty. Sorry for rushing you." "No, it's fine. But I would prefer you start as soon as possible. Could you talk to your boss as soon as you get back today? Once things are settled, please contact me right away." He handed me a business card with his phone number written on it. "Are you really going to hire me?" "Of course, you know how much I value you. I want you to continue your work here." "Thank you." And so, my job switch was settled surprisingly smoothly. 2 weeks have passed after being headhunted by Mr. Anderson. I officially resigned from the cleaning company and joined Anderson Industries. Today is my first day at work. Feeling a bit nervous, I adjusted my collar, checking for dust and stains on the suit I was wearing. This suit was actually a hand-me-down from Mr. Anderson. Since I had joined a cleaning company immediately after high school graduation, I never had the occasion to wear a suit and only owned a recruitment suit. I was thinking that being 30 plus, wearing the recruitment suit is probably not a good idea. You probably haven't had many occasions to wear a suit before. Mr. Anderson said so. Grateful for the kindness of others, I patted my cheeks a few times to psych myself up. After entering the building, I asked the receptionist to inform Mr. Anderson of my arrival, and first went to greet him. "Oh, Mike, you're here. Good morning. I look forward to working with you." "Yes, I'm looking forward to it too. I have high expectations for you." "Thank you, I'll do my best." A secretary was assigned to show me around the office. Feeling humble, I visited each department to introduce myself. Everyone in each department knew that I had been coming and going as a janitor, and many had become familiar faces over time, so there was a welcoming atmosphere. Finally, I headed to my new department, the product planning department, and introduced myself to everyone. "Starting today, I'll be working with you. My name is Mike. Nice to meet you." Though nervous, I was relieved to be warmly received. Then, I noticed one empty seat. "Whose seat is that?" "Oh, that's Jack's seat. He's been in a meeting since this morning and isn't here right now. I see. Nodding at the words of the woman from the planning department, I suddenly remembered that I was also supposed to attend that meeting. I quickly checked the time and then hurriedly asked for and headed to the meeting room location. Fortunately, there was still a little time before the meeting started, and only one other man was present. This man was probably Jack. I needed to greet him properly. "Are you Jack, I believe? I apologize for the late introduction. I've been assigned to the product planning department starting today. My name is Mike, and weren't you just the bottom-rung janitor here until last week? What are you doing here?" Jack cut me off mid-sentence and confronted me. "Mr. Anderson instructed me to attend this meeting." "You, at this meeting? You're just a high school graduate and former janitor. How can a person with such low education be recruited by this company, let alone have a seat at this meeting? There's one less chair than needed, meaning there's no seat for you." As Jack aggressively confronted me, I scratched my head, wondering what to say. "Well, first of all, that seat is mine, so I'm definitely attending the meeting, Jack. I said I belong to the product planning department, but I didn't say I was your subordinate. And about this meeting, you don't need to attend, so the number of people is just right." "What? Not a subordinate? Impossible." As Jack said this, he looked at the nameplate on the seat I pointed to. What does this mean?" The nameplate read, "Product Planning Department Head, Mike." "Nothing much, just that I've been appointed as the head of the Product Planning Department from today. Jack, you're my subordinate from now on." "This can't be happening," Jack shouted, throwing my nameplate to the floor. Just then, the door to the meeting room opened and the executives gathered. "Hey there, Mike. It's your first day today, right? Looking forward to working with you. Early start, everyone's got high hopes for you. Counting on you, buddy." As everyone greeted me warmly, they took their seats. Although Jack was breathing heavily with anger, the scene in front of him seemed so unbelievable that his expression gradually turned into one of utter confusion. In the midst of this, someone kindly picked up my name tag that was dropped on the floor. "Mr. Anderson, good day to you." It was Mr. Anderson. "Mike, any trouble here?" As he returned my name tag to my desk, he looked curiously between us. "No, nothing at all." "Is that so? By the way, why is Jack here?" Well, the workday should have started by now. We have a meeting soon, so you should head back to your department quickly." At Mr. Anderson's words, Jack grumbled something under his breath and left the meeting room, looking unsatisfied. "All right, everyone. I think you might already know, but I'd like to introduce our company's new member. As some of you may know, effective today, I've been assigned to the product planning department. My name's Mike. Pleased to meet you all." Following Mr. Anderson's introduction, I introduced myself and was met with warm applause from the executives. Mike here was in charge of our company's janitorial duties until recently. He's skilled and trustworthy. I wanted him to fully demonstrate the cleaning know-how and innovative ideas he has cultivated over time, so I selected him to head the product planning department, which was vacant. It was my own decision, but does anyone have any objection? Nobody raised any objections, and everyone welcomed me as their new department head. I learned that my predecessor was a woman. She had resigned due to childbirth, leaving the department head position vacant for a while. Normally, Jack, who was a manager, should have been promoted to department head, but his promotion was put on hold due to his overbearing attitude, which had been a growing concern within the department. After the previous department head left, Jack's behavior only escalated, and there were several complaints about him to the HR department. However, I wasn't originally meant to be a department head. I had heard from Mr. Anderson himself that he initially intended to employ me directly as a janitor for the company, which I had also assumed. When the idea of direct employment came up, he had asked to accommodate as many of my requests as possible, including janitorial equipment. I showed him the ideas and tools I had secretly developed and modified. Anderson Industries, a storage and household goods manufacturer, seemed like a place where I could bring to life the ideas I had written down, ideas I had always wanted to actualize. Realizing this was an opportunity I couldn't miss, I found myself passionately making my case. Mr. Anderson didn't criticize me but instead looked thoughtfully at my ideas and tools for a while. "How about we make these together?" He proposed this afterwards. "Together? Actually, the head of our product planning department is currently vacant, and I'd like to recommend you." "Department head, me. Jess, we've been wanting to expand our cleaning supplies, but we haven't had any great ideas. After hearing your pitch, I thought your ideas seemed practical and something I'd want to use. Mike, you plan it and we'll make it. Yes, I think you'd be suitable. What do you think?" I'm honored just to be employed, let alone in such a position. It's too much for me." "Haha, no need to take it so seriously. Even as a department head, you'll be planning with everyone in the department. I think you're up to the task, Mike. Plus, as the head of the planning department, you'll be the first to try out the prototypes of new cleaning products, won't you? New prototypes, of my own design, and being the first to test them." That was exactly what I wanted, and so I found myself nodding in agreement. Thus, as the new head of product planning, I attended my first meeting and seized the moment to share all my ideas for cleaning tools. I got so carried away with my enthusiastic speech that I thought I might have scared them off, but it seemed my passion got through, and the executives largely agreed with me. One of my ideas was even selected for development into a prototype, which left me unable to contain my excitement. Continuing as the department head, I proposed improvements for the cleaning tools currently in development and, leveraging my certification as a professional organizer, suggested improvements for health products, making every day at work enjoyable. Even as I progressed in my role, I requested to continue the weekly Wednesday office cleaning and Saturday cleaning at Mr. Anderson's house, under the pretext of testing prototypes. At first, Mr. Anderson was surprised by my request, but then he said this: "Your skills are reliable, and I trust you. It was the original plan, so it's a help if you can do it. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with your duties as department head." His approval only fueled my motivation. Eventually, I wanted to use the expertise I gained from the cleaning company and was in talks with the marketing department about promotions. Jack, who initially confronted me, eventually stopped after I continued to focus on my work, possibly having some realization. The interaction with Jack during that meeting was apparently witnessed by Mr. Anderson, and Jack received a stern warning from him afterward. Due to his past behavior and the complaints from his subordinates, Jack was demoted from manager to a supervisor position. This seemed to have a significant impact on him, and he became much quieter. Amidst all this, I finally had a chance to have an open and honest conversation with Jack. "While we're at it, let me ask you, what was your dissatisfaction with me? Was it because of my low education, or because I was just a janitor who suddenly appeared out of nowhere?" "Well, yes, that's about it." At first, Jack hesitated to speak, but as I persistently questioned him, he began to share his thoughts bit by bit. Jack graduated from a prestigious university and was confident in his academic achievements. However, it turns out his preferred company was elsewhere, and he didn't secure a job offer there during his job hunt. Feeling confident about his educational background, he was deeply disappointed when his life didn't turn out to be the elite career he had envisioned. Despite being hired at this company, his enthusiasm eventually turned into resentment, thinking, "I can't end my career in a company like this." Even under the previous department head, I couldn't accept working under a woman. I looked down on her, thinking, "How dare she, being a woman?" I'd even resorted to harassing her behind her back. Is that so? After she left, I naturally thought I, as the manager, would be promoted, but then, to my dismay, someone with lower level of education became my boss. It felt so empty, wondering why someone who just showed up out of nowhere gets valued and becomes the head, while I get no recognition at all. That's probably why, right there. But even if you say that, Jack, looking down, seemed not to fully understand what he had done wrong. I may indeed have a lower level of education, and I understand how working in a cleaning company is perceived by society. I just liked the job of cleaning, not because I had any special confidence in myself. However, thoughts like I want to create this kind of product, it would be better if it was like this, or this might make it easier to use and lessen the burden. I believe I have more than anyone. I'm not creating these things just to be evaluated by a supervisor. I did the cleaning work originally because I liked it. The previous department head probably planned things from a woman's perspective, closely aligned with the consumers. That's why she became the department head. It's not about being a woman or a man. It's about being evaluated based on achievements, which you, Jack, should have known better. But what about you, Jack? Have you ever thought about the consumers? Have you considered this could make it better, or let's try this? Have you only been thinking about getting evaluated yourself and not empathizing with the consumer's feelings? That's maybe true. It's about that. The most important thing in the product planning department is probably that mindset. Maybe this department isn't the right fit for you. Maybe even this company. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. If you want to be valued, you need to find the right place for yourself. You won't get the appreciation you want if you don't stand in the right ring. Jack couldn't argue against my words and was at a loss for words. Look, you can't sell vegetables in a clothing store. It's the same as that. Even if you wait, you won't get the appreciation you want. If you want to be valued in the planning department, you need to change your mindset. I told Jack, hoping he would understand, but he left without responding, murmuring something to himself. A few days later, on Saturday, while I was cleaning Mr. Anderson's house, he approached me with a smile. "How can I help you?" I don't know what you said, but Jack went to HR the other day. He requested a department transfer. Jack did? Yes. He said he got advice from you. Advice? I just had an open talk with him, and he had a lot to think about. We just exchanged ideas. Is that so? Well, I'll hear about it later. As a result of the discussion, he's been transferred to the accounting department. The official notice will come out next week. Is that so? I was surprised that Jack took such action on his own. My words had gotten through to him. Thinking that, I felt a bit happy. He seems satisfied, but what do you think? Well, Jack may be harsh and overbearing, but he's meticulous, fast, and accurate in his work. He has a keen eye, so maybe accounting suits him better, at least better than the planning department. I couldn't help but laugh. I agree. Mr. Anderson laughed too. Just as Mr. Anderson said, an official notice was issued, and Jack was transferred. True to his nature, Jack's meticulous and anxious personality came to life in his new role. Some from other departments even complained that the accounting reviews had become somewhat stricter and more challenging. However, he seemed to be enjoying his work, exhibiting his skills. He was seemingly quite valued in the accounting department. He hadn't completely lost his overbearing nature, but it appeared he no longer got unreasonably angry or made sarcastic remarks. It was a relief to see that accounting, not the planning department, was a better fit for him. Finding the field that suits you is important, isn't it? Yes, it is. You seem to fit perfectly in your current role, and as the one who promoted you, I'm very proud. I'm just working hard, that's all. That's what makes it impressive. Well, I'm counting on you in the future, Mike. Yes, of course. I nodded to Mr. Anderson and then returned to the planning department. Okay, everyone, move to the conference room. The planning meeting starts in 5 minutes. I want to continue coming up with plans that will be helpful to someone through this company. I felt strongly about that. I got married to my college girlfriend when I was 30. Working in the planning department at the headquarters of a luxury confectionery manufacturer, I had a decent income, and my wife became a homemaker after our marriage. We were living a comfortable life, and our relationship was good. I thought we would continue to have happy days like these. But life doesn't always go so smoothly. 5 years into our marriage, I was suddenly transferred from the planning department to sales at a store. I was unfairly blamed for a mistake due to my boss's selfish jealousy. I think I was good at my job. Clients would say, "Your plans are always a step ahead, aren't they?" I was sometimes praised. But my immediate boss, Scott, didn't think highly of me. We often had disagreements and arguments at work. One day, Scott called me in unexpectedly to report. "What? Assigned to a store and losing my position. This is sudden and problematic. Is this because of the recent ordering mistake? But that was per your instructions, Scott. I didn't make that mistake, right?" I confronted my boss, but Scott just sneered. "It's a decision from above. Nothing can be done. When it rains, it pours." While I was still shocked by the sudden job change, another devastating event occurred. I left work early that day, thinking about how to break the news to my wife. With the demotion, my salary would decrease. I wondered what my wife would say. But I thought she would understand. And she would say, "I'll do my best." With these thoughts, I returned home. As I eagerly opened the front door, my wife was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen showed signs of an interrupted dinner preparation. Maybe she noticed something missing and went out to buy it. While sitting on the sofa, her cell phone rang on the table. She must have hurried out and forgotten it. Glancing at the screen, I saw the sinner's name. And it was followed by a heart emoji and then another heart. A bad feeling hit me and I grabbed the phone. Opening the new message, I found emails between my wife and another man. "Thanks for inviting me to dinner today. I was happy to see you. I love you." What is this? The following messages took my breath away. My wife was having an affair. When she returned from shopping, I confronted her with the phone. What is this all about? Her face turned pale, and she broke down crying. And that's how I ended up divorcing my wife. Her affair was with an ex-boyfriend, whom she reconnected with by chance at a shopping center. I could have demanded alimony, but honestly, I didn't have the energy. I just wanted to end it quickly and forget about it. Soon after, my wife left. I moved from the company housing to a small town where my new job was. The assigned store was a cake shop in front of a regional train station. The prices were quite high, and the customers seemed wealthy. I had little experience in customer service, and since joining the store, I've been constantly scolded by the manager, Maria. Maria was a tough woman, just as she appeared. She seemed irritated by my incompetence, treating me differently than other employees. There were 3 part-time employees at the store, all women and mothers. The gossip-loving women were whispering about why I had suddenly come from the headquarters. I felt isolated, unable to blend in with Maria or the part-time ladies. I thought about quitting, but in these times, finding another job isn't easy. So, I decided to rack up some achievements quickly and make my way back to the headquarters. However, despite my determination, things didn't go smoothly. I made mistakes like giving the wrong change and ringing up sales incorrectly almost daily. Maria looked at me with disappointment. As a full-time employee, you should be more competent. We're already struggling with fewer customers, and it's gotten worse since you arrived. The part-timers chuckled at me daily. I knew all my mistakes were my fault. I was even surprised by my own poor memory after turning 50. It's embarrassing. I used to handle my work so well at the headquarters. And that was my everyday life. One day, the weather was bad, with a light rain, and perhaps because of that, the store was quiet until closing time. When I went outside to bring in the storefront sign, I saw a young girl, about kindergarten age, standing in front. She was peering into the cake showcase. Wondering what was going on, I rushed over to her. "It's starting to rain. Why don't you come inside the store for a bit?" The girl nodded silently. I quickly grabbed a towel from the back and wiped her wet hair and asked, "Did you come to buy a cake today?" When I asked, she nodded and sadly said, "Yes. I wanted to buy a cake for my mom, but I only have 50 cents. I couldn't find any cake for that price anywhere." Moved by her sad expression, I told her, "Don't worry about the money. Pick out a cake that your mom would like," with a smile. Her face lit up with a smile. "Really? Of course. Yay, Mom loves cute cakes, so I'll choose this one." She picked out a small but beautifully decorated fruit cake. I wrapped a box in pretty paper and handed it to her. The girl took the box of cake with great care, said thank you and left with a satisfied look on her face. When I opened the door, the rain had already stopped. It was just leftover cake that wouldn't sell the next day. Better given away than wasted, I thought, as I watched her leave. Then Maria, who was on break in the back, came out. I heard a child's voice. "What happened?" I explained the situation. Maria glared and scolded. "Why didn't you consult me first? Don't do things on your own." Since that day, Maria became even harsher with me, burdening me with menial tasks and reducing my time at the front. The part-timers continued to snicker at me. It was humiliating. I thought I'd rather be unemployed than continue this job. Just when I was contemplating quitting, I stumbled upon an article in a cake magazine. It featured a cake from our store. Reading carefully, it said, "My daughter was treated so kindly by a male employee at this cake shop. I was touched by his kindness, and the cake was delicious." Looking at the author's profile, they were a popular online cook, known for cute desserts and elaborate dishes, popular among women. I didn't know much about them, but the next day at the store, a part-time lady excitedly said, "This is about you, isn't it?" after seeing the magazine. That day, our cake sales skyrocketed, and even Maria seemed pleased. "This might be thanks to you," she said. Despite thinking it was a blatant turnaround, I was genuinely happy that the cakes sold well. Then, a few days later, that little girl and her mother visited the store. "My name is Elizabeth. Thank you for being so kind to Lily the other day," Elizabeth said. She bowed politely. She was even more beautiful in person than in the photos from the magazine, which made me nervous. Lily, alongside Elizabeth, also bowed and said, "Thank you." The employees, including Maria, who came to stand next to me, sparkled at Elizabeth's arrival. "Thank you for featuring our store in the magazine," Maria said to her. Elizabeth then replied, "Thank you. Last time, I only had 50 cents for a cake, right? I feel bad, so let me pay properly." She took out her wallet. "That's all right. Your feature helped increase our sales significantly. We should be thanking you." Maria laughed and answered. Elizabeth and Lily began visiting the store frequently, and I slowly started having conversations with Elizabeth. I found myself being drawn to her. But she was married. I forcefully suppressed those feelings. One day, Lily came to the store and invited me, "Come to Mom's cooking class. You can cook with us." Elizabeth was hosting a cooking class. Hesitating, Elizabeth, listening nearby, looked at me with pleading eyes and said, "Please come." Her expression made my heart skip a beat, and I blurted out, "I'd love to." I wasn't much into cooking, but I was excited to see Elizabeth and started attending regularly. Gradually, I got better at cooking and found joy in creating delicious dishes. Every time I finished cooking and ate with relish, Elizabeth would smile at me warmly. After about 6 months of these days, Elizabeth suddenly invited me out for coffee. I thought it would be a cafe or something, but it turned out to be a trendy high-end restaurant popular online. "I'm sorry for calling you out so suddenly," Elizabeth said with an apologetic look. "No problem. I'm just a single guy with time on my hands," I replied with a laugh. Elizabeth looked surprised. "Really? I thought someone as wonderful as you would be married by now." Her question made me boldly ask in return. Elizabeth, you have a husband, right? No, not anymore. I'm divorced. It happened 6 months ago, she replied with a smile. I felt a bit happy hearing that, which made me feel pathetic. Elizabeth's expression then turned sad as she spoke about her divorce. It's embarrassing, but my husband cheated on me with one of my friends. I trusted her, so it was a huge shock. Her ex-husband seemed unremorseful, paid her alimony, and left triumphantly. She shared how Lily, wanting to cheer her up, decided to buy a cake from our shop. At a time when Elizabeth was losing faith in people, hearing about the kindness at the cake shop made her want to meet me. I see. Actually, I also got divorced because of my ex-wife's affair. The day I found out was the same day I got demoted at work. I thought it was the worst day of my life. I shared, smiling wryly. Well, what a coincidence. Elizabeth seemed surprised by my story. Then she continued. I wanted to talk about that today, but there's something more important. She looked down as she spoke. Before she could continue, I blurted out, would you like to start dating, even as friends? Elizabeth looked up and said shyly, I'd be happy to, and not just as friends. I confessed my feelings to her. Then, let's date officially. Elizabeth smiled at me with a childlike, adorable smile and slowly nodded. And so, we became a couple. Now, every day is incredibly joyful. I've gotten completely used to the job at the store, and ever since Elizabeth introduced me, the number of customers has steadily increased. The store's sales have soared, and after a while, I was reassigned to the headquarters. Returning to the headquarters after a long time, I found out that Scott, who had demoted me, was no longer there. Apparently, he made a big mistake and was fired. Elizabeth was thrilled about my promotion. Recently, Lily has started asking if she can call me Dad. I'm planning to propose to Elizabeth on her birthday next month. Currently, our daily routine is searching for a house to live in together as a family of 3. We've both been through a lot in our past, but that makes us want to create even more happiness in the future. I want to protect them for the rest of my life. That's what I'm thinking.